Hello, welcome to this. We're looking at, again, topic 2, which is looking at religion and social change. This is lesson 3. We're looking at religion and social protest. We're going to be introducing a big name in the area today, and he's used a couple of examples which we're going to be looking at, which include the New Christian Right and also the civil rights movement. So as we see there, we see the very important speaker and civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. So let's get into this now. We're trying to understand how religion can be used as a way to drive social change. Okay, and Steve Bruce is going to be arguing this. Now, who is Steve Bruce? Well, Steve Bruce is a big name in beliefs in society. He is a theorist, and he is based in the UK. He's based actually in Scotland. He started off over at Belfast University, and then after a little while transferred to Aberdeen. So he's a leading theorist there. If you went on to study at Aberdeen, you might be able to attend his lectures, because he is a professor at the University of Aberdeen. There you can go to his talks, etc. So he believes in secularization. Okay, so his general point that he's making is that religion is dying out in the Western world. So he believes that gradually religious forces and those things there overall are resulting in secularization, the decline permanently of religion. So he's written quite a few books, quite a few things. Some of his key books, some of his key pieces are God is Dead, the Secularization of the West, and that was published back in 2002 now, so 23 years ago, and yet it's still seen as a really important text in this area. So, you know, it shows you, if you do good work, it tends to hang around. He's then gone on, he also wrote another book in 2003, Politics and Religion, and in 2008, Paisley, which is talking about specific areas there. So he gives us theories in many areas in beliefs in society, but most of them normally come back to the idea that religion is dying off, is declining, that secularization is happening, that we are becoming a non-faith based nation. We could probably, for instance, transfer over to your family and households unit, which you'll be doing, and talk about the fact that religion is declining, and so because of religion's declining, we can then see that there's a decline in the need to get married, because people got married for religious reasons, and so as such, with a decline in religiosity in the West, we see that now marriage is at a record low. So we have, I think it's about 21,000 marriages last year, compared to back in like the 50s and 60s, when we were having loads of people getting married. So had like 316 marriages a year. Yeah, a lot of people getting married on those. Now it's down to below the 20s, and that includes gay marriage in that factor. Okay, so even including gay marriages, we still see a lot lower marriages. And Bruce would argue that that's because we're living in a decreasing religious society, that secularization is happening, and as such, we are less likely to believe in God. So he's a big dog in this area. He's a major theorist. We're going to need to know about him, and we're going to need to refer to him. So I'd expect him to come up in essays on this, okay? Either as a main theorist or as a person criticizing. So just as we covered Marxist feminists, Bruce is going to be one of our, as I say, big names, big theorists, which we're mostly expecting to see being used in essays in this area. So like Weber, he looks at a couple of different areas and says that we can recognize that religion and social change are linked. Now, he chooses to use a few case studies. And what he does, he compares the two examples and the role in which the religious organizations have inspired protest movements or changes and what they've sought to change and achieve. Okay, so what we're going to look at in this session is the civil rights movement based in America, and we're going to look at the new Christian right movement, again based in America, which is interesting seeing as he's never lived in America, but as far as I know, he's for University of Belfast and University of Aberdeen. I'm pretty sure he's not American on that one. So again, the classic British theorist talking about America. Right, let's move forward. So first of all, Bruce identifies several ways in which religious organizations are well equipped to support protests and contribute to social change. So, first of all, he says that there's the ability of the organization to take them the moral high ground. They also have a way of challenging the dissent and acting as an honesty broker, allowing negotiation, allowing dialogue there, and also ability to mobilize public opinion by being able to connect with different groups. So let's talk it through specifically in the context of this Black civil rights movement. So when it came to taking the moral high ground, well, Black clergy pointed out the hypocrisy of the white clergy, that they preach love your neighbor but then supported racial segregation, because that doesn't work. They're talking about the key elements of their faith, and that doesn't work. I was listening to a brilliant talk by Stephen Fry, and he was pointing out the hypocrisy in the Catholic Church about different things there, and it's a fantastic, really challenging talk at a debate, arguing whether the Catholic Church is a force for good or evil in the world. Anyway, so challenge dissent. Religion provides channels to express political dissent. E.g., the funeral of Martin Luther King was a rallying point for the civil rights cause. So many people who had listened to that amazing speech he did, who had connected on that, then with his death, it then kind of it could have gone one or two ways. It could have either been like the breaking of the movement or the making of the movement. It went on to be a key moment which they were able to challenge that and say this happened. We need to keep pushing because of it. We also see them acting as an honesty broker. So in the case of the churches in America, they can provide context for negotiating changes because you have slightly more educated people, and they often being respected by both sides. They're men of God, and I say men of God because particularly in this case, at that time, we were very much looking at Black pastors being men at times still, and also white pastors being men, and when we see religious movements being mainly male-led on that. So anyway, they are often respected by both sides of the conflict and seen as standing above mere politics. So they are able to kind of stand in the middle and bridge the gap between the different groups. So we also see it mobilizing public opinion. Now, in the case of Black churches in the South, they were able to successfully campaign for support across the whole of America from there. So they were able to go to churches and to meetings, and by using those as gathering points, they're able to spread the message about this is not right, this is not just. We're fed up being treated like this. We need to work together in order to get this to change. So Bruce sees that the civil rights movement is an example of religion becoming involved in secular struggle. In this case, the struggle for equal rights and status. So his views of the movement are that because it shared the same values as the wider society and those in power, it brought about the changes by shaming those in power to put in practice the principles of equality that are embodied in the American Constitution and in their religion. Okay, so that is really, really important for us to understand. So this is an example which I want you to know about, a little bit extra detail on there. So it's a very significant event in the civil rights movement, which you might have heard of, Martin Luther King's famous speech, but you probably haven't heard of the Little Rock Nine. Now, Little Rock was a school in which um, the Black civil rights movement gained the right for Black children to be educated and be treated in the same way as white. Now, this meant that they had the right to go to the schools that white children went to, but no one had done that yet. And so, in the case of a Little Rock Nine, these were a group of 9 very able, very capable students who enrolled at the local white school. Now, why? Why are they putting themselves through that? Because the education being provided in the white schools by comparison to the black schools was significantly better quality, better school, better equipment, better resourcing, better qualified staff, and as such, for them to be able to progress and develop and gain, they wanted to do this, and so they enroll in this school, knowing that it's going to be difficult. And on their first day of going up, they try to go into school, but actually they're not able to get into school because of protesters literally blocking their pathway into school, throwing things, and basically they're driven away from the school by the crowds. Now, the there's this staggering development in which the local state governor is in support of the white community not allowing them. And so the president of the United States at the time, I believe off the top of my head, it was Jimmy Carter. Don't quote me on that one, but I do believe it was. He turns around and he sends in 1,000 National Guardsmen to the school to stand in the school and to escort these students into class and to stay with them and make it so that they are in. Now, it's making a massive statement. And these students, it's not just about them getting an education, about each individual. It's a big statement. This is the thing that is changing, and that it was a thing that the civil rights movement through the Black church had campaigned for on there. And actually, this was a serving president, turning around and helping them to go to school. So what I'd like to do is I'd like you to watch that clip. So you're going to have to pop out of the video and look down the bottom to get the access to the actual link there. And I want you to watch that. I want you to answer those 3 questions. Why was it so important if just 9 students got a chance to get an education? Was it worth the grief they had to endure? And importantly, how was it an example of what Bruce says? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So we're now going to be talking about his second example. Now, this is interesting because he talks about the civil rights movement as a force in which the religion was used in order to force and make change happen, and was successful in that. But he talks about the new Christian right as a fundamentalist American movement, which is unsuccessful. That's really interesting. He talks about one that was and one that wasn't successful. So he sees it as a failed movement for change. Now, the New Christian Right starts to come to prominence in the 1960s in America, particularly opposing the liberalization of American society. So we see that that more liberal views upon black and white, but also on sexuality and on marriage, the contraceptive pill, all these things there. The idea that it's okay to have sexual contact prior to marriage, all those things there which are being made possible by these contraceptives and the hippie movements and all those things. We see that the New Christian Right is kind of a reaction against this. Okay, they're pushing back against the situation present in America at the time, and they have a very direct aim, which is to try and take America back to God's on there. So they want it to go back to the that Bible verse on those things. Now they made really effective use of media and networking. Okay, particularly they used a thing called televangelism. Now basically it's evangelical preaching on TV. If you go onto your TV at home now and you scroll down, you keep on going down on those free channels and keep them down, you at some point will find a religious based channel. Now, that happened in America in the 1960s far quicker. And you've got to remember that loads of people in America can't afford cable or those expensive packages and those things there. And actually, a lot of TV channels were, quite limited. And so one of the things that they started doing is setting up TV channels in which you could listen to these speeches going on and giving that in your own home and broadcasting these programs. Sometimes they'd be doing it to raise funds, and they'd be getting people to call in and pledge money to those. But the whole point of the televangelism was to make converts and to recruit new members to their church, and it worked. Okay, which is interesting when we talk about this as a failed movement, but it worked in getting a lot of quite white right-wing Christians to move into these groups. And what they did is they effectively formed right-wing Christian pressure groups that didn't just focus on spirituality, but also became a focus for political campaigning and strengthening links with the Republican Party. Okay, now that's important. There's a strong link between these, and we can even talk about Donald Trump and his current government and what they're doing. This is the second time Trump has been in power, and he and a lot of his supporters have quite right wing, but also quite fundamentalist religious viewpoints about what is right and what is wrong in the world. And we see, for instance, the way abortion laws have been changed in this second term of Donald Trump. So there is the legacy still of this, and maybe Bruce judged this too soon on this, but we'll go carry on. Let's talk about it in a little more depth. Okay, so Bruce argues that the New Christian Right, or NCR, is a failed movement for change. So it attempts to impose the Protestant fundamentalist morality on others. But that failed due to the liberal and democratic values of most Americans. So they say you have a right to have your faith and your opinion on those things there, but I don't have to agree with you. You can live as you wish. You can live with your wife wearing those really strict clothes and going to church and feeling those things. That's your right. But it's also my right as American not to. It's my right as American not to believe, not to do those things there. And in America, there, as part of their constitution, there's a fundamental separation between church and state. Now, that was done as part of the uh, moving away from the church and state that was present in Britain, with the king having the divine right to rule, all that sort of stuff. And so the Americans very deliberately wrote into their constitution the separation of church and state. So religion is not at all, in theory, allowed to affect the running of the government. So you'll hear basically most presidents in America, they don't talk about their religion. Okay, so Obama was quite religious. George Bush was, all those things there, but they don't openly talk about their religion prior to being elected, or during the time in which they're elected. They talk about afterwards and those things there. Trump, again, of course, is breaking the mold, and he's talked about his faith and those things there. And the same in British prime ministers, they tend not to talk about their faith and those things there. So again, Tony Blair's are quite a high level of faith, and he talked about that after only he'd been prime minister, as most of our prime ministers have done so. They tend not to talk about their faith. This idea that we keep our religion and our policies separate. So surveys show that most Americans are comfortable with legislating activities that they personally legalizing, activities they personally believe are immoral, such as abortion, which was made illegal again in 2024 in quite a few states. So that's an issue that kind of comes back in the opposite way. Homosexuality, pornography, and are unwilling to accept other people's definition of how they should live their lives. So the reason that they said it, I don't think it's right. I don't think it should be done, but you're right to do it. That's what they are saying. So Americans have this interesting dichotomy between what they believe is morally right and what they should limit people to do. It's like gun ownership. When we look in America, there's lots of Americans who do not own a gun, but they would argue the right to bear arms is a constitutional right, which they should maintain. So this causes a problem for the New Christian Right. They believe in the literal truth of the Bible, which insists that you shouldn't be able to, have homosexuality, to have abortions interfere with God's will for children or not. That pornography is coveting other people's, all those things, things you can't have, etc. And that's all sinful. So they, in the New Christian Right, believe the literal truth of the Bible, right down to how many years the world has been in existence. So they say 4,000 years that the world has been in existence based upon the Bible, and the Old Testament. They counted back and worked out things. They say like the world is 4,000 years old. They literally believe in exactly what the Bible is saying is the truth. It is the truth all the time, and as such, they believe that society should be run in that way. We can look at fundamentalist movements in different faiths. So in Abrahamic faith, we can look across to Islam, and we can see that, for instance, Iran is fundamentalist Islamic, and they believe very much in that, following that law. So we see Sharia law on those things. So there is examples of countries which have fundamentalist religious factions which guide and kind of dictate how things are done. But in America, it didn't and doesn't work because they have this division between church and state. Okay, so it prevents them from being able to change the way in which things are being governed. And that is what Bruce is pointing out to us. It's also impossible to actually demand this in a mature democracy. Democracies are run by the majority opinion, but the point is it leaves room for minority opinions too, for other people to have a different viewpoint. It allows for that. It's not a dictatorship, it's not an authoritarian regime in any way, and as such there's room for difference of opinion. And the argument that Bruce says is that because of the nature of America, that it will never be the case that we can have this fundamentalist shift in America because there's too diverse of opinion and it's an established democracy. Now, that's kind of held true for quite a while, but Donald Trump might be disproving what Bruce is saying. There is concerns about Donald Trump changing legislation in order to allow himself to have another term or to stay longer, in which we could see with Donald Trump it moving to be more of a dictatorship. Now, it's also very important to recognize that actually a lot of people in Donald Trump's support base believe very much in the truth of Trump, that everything Trump says is true, and anything that's said ever against him or said that he no longer says he said is clearly a lie. It's a conspiracy against him. And it's possible that this new Christian right, who actually quite a lot of the voters and supporters of Donald Trump do actually kind of sympathize with some of their illiberal views. So of banning, for instance, abortion, which we saw happen in 2024, we could actually see it going back the opposite way. So it might be that Bruce has kind of prejudged the new Christian right as having failed, whereas it might have been this kind of planted seeds which haven't really come to fruition until this second thing of the second term of Donald Trump. So we don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. It is currently perceived by Bruce as a failed movement for change, but it might change that. Okay, so keep your eyes peeled. This is going on right now. This is something which we have to look at. So let's look at comparison for New Christian Right to the Civil Rights Movement. So it is undeniable that the Civil Rights Movement achieved at least some level of success in that it gained the rights for Black Americans to be treated in a way which otherwise would not have happened. It's also important to recognize that if this is the case, then society, changed because of that movement. So the civil rights movement, in connection with the church, brought about that change, i.e., demonstrating, as Bruce is arguing, that in some situations religion can be a force of change, but he then points out New Christian Right and says it has to, however, have certain aspects, and it can be the case that actually it doesn't always work. So we had that consistency of the motivated protest movements and the pressure groups that were consistent throughout the wider society, and this can be seen in the Christian, the civil rights movement. However, when we look at the case in America for the New Christian Right, they didn't connect with the mainstream beliefs about democracy, equality, and religious freedom. And that is why the New Christian Right did not do anything like as well as the civil rights movement. Okay, so the New Christian Right fails where the civil rights movement actually succeeds. Now, I want to show you a video clip. This one will take a while. This is by the investigative journalist Louis Theroux. He's done a lot of great things looking at this. He's a great journalist looking at different aspects and different issues in society. And what I want to do, again, the link is in the player. You might need someone to log in with the BBC account on there. But I want you to think about the ways in which they promote their views, and is it effective? Okay. That the episode is Louis Theroux, the most hated family in America. And I want you to look at those. This family is New Christian Right. Okay. And I want you to see why it is that it works for one family, or works for one movement, sorry, the civil rights movement, but it doesn't work for the New Christian Right. I think you can understand why it doesn't work for the New Christian Right, having watched this video. Okay, so please watch this and then discuss. Okay, again, it'll take you a little while to do so. Thank you very much, folks. I'll see you on the next session.